Welcome to our special webinar today, MSP Packaging and Pricing, Strategies to Dramatically Increase Sales and Profits with Gary Pica. I'm pleased to introduce you to our two presenters today. First of all, here with me in Ottawa is David Weeks, who is our Channel Sales Manager here at SolarWinds Enable, and I am sure very familiar to many of you on the line today. Joining David is someone, again, who is very familiar with you, and that will be Gary Pica. And Gary is the founder of True Methods, which is a coaching, peer, and accountability firm aimed at helping IT solution providers reach their full potential as MSPs and cloud providers. Welcome, gentlemen, and have a great webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you. So just first today to lead off, I guess, to kind of put a premise on this, and part of the reason that we're doing this with Gary today is we've started something here at SolarWinds Enable called our Insight Sessions. And we have a team of channel sales consultants who work with our partner base, over 5,500 MSPs. And we go through consulting engagements with them on a regular basis. And a big part of that is to understand their business and help them to avoid a lot of the pitfalls that they might run into in the industry and to help them grow recurring revenue across every facet of their business. And we do this over 2,000 times a year with partners who come on board with us and then alongside with our existing partners. So I believe that this segues really well into what we're going to talk about today, Gary. So what I'd like to do now is hand it over to you so you can kind of take the reins from here as we go forward.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you so much for having me today. I love this topic of packaging and pricing. So the first thing I want to say, David, is that everything we're going to talk about today, none of this is theory, right? This is all in practice. So I've been in this business for 20 years. My first MSP, Dynamic Digital Services, between 1996 and 2008, we went from 0 to 7,000 endpoints under management before we were acquired by Mindshift Technologies. And since 2009, I've worked with over 1,000, MSPs and helping them grow sales and profitability. And 4 years ago, I invested in another MSP. And through today, I'll talk a little bit about where we are with the new MSP and using the same kind of processes that we're going to talk about. So I go back a long way in this, and I know that you work with people, every single day. So we really want to try to give usable information that's proven, that's being used in all marketplaces, that people are confident they can take some things today and implement them immediately in their business.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think this is going to be excellent for everybody on the line, no matter where they might be in the maturity of their business, Gary, in terms of finding, new areas, like you said, that are proven in the marketplace. And one of the biggest things that we see outside of, sales in general, which I know you do a lot of work on, number two, the biggest issue that we see MSPs run into is properly packaging those services and, being effective in going to market with them.
Yeah, and I want to just start about where the marketplace is today, level setting, what an average MSP looks like, and what top, or I call world class, the top people in our industry, what kind of results they get. And so I want to start by looking at this and some of these results, and and then we'll revisit them at the end to kind of have people relate the impact of packaging and pricing on the real things in your business. So here's what I see again, and I work with many MSPs around the world. Inconsistent growth when it comes to MRR, monthly recurring revenue. So everybody wants more recurring revenue, but I see inconsistent sales, right? They get a sale 1 month, they get a new customer, and then maybe a month or more goes by before another one happens to come their way. It's just inconsistent. Their average price, I call it AISP, or all-in seat price. So take all your recurring revenue divided by all the seats you support, and that gives you your average price. We see it at $100 average seat price or less. What that means is that leverage is low. In other words, how much annual service revenue do you generate based on the total number of employees in your business? And we're going to dive into the definition of that later in the webinar. The result of all that is, of not selling enough and at the prices that aren't what they could be, is that we see net profit percentages at 10% or less, not that different than they were 5 years ago, and you're creating very few jobs. We want to create opportunity for people. Now, if you look at that against top MSPs, they're adding recurring revenue at the right price every month. they're commanding prices between $120 and $160 average a seat, so 20 to 50% higher than the average. They're generating 50% more service revenue with the same amount of employees, margins that are 2 and 3 times the average, and they're creating opportunity not just for themselves, right, as entrepreneurs, but they're creating opportunities for all of their team members. And that's what this is about, creating a thriving business. So let me just put an exclamation point on this, and then we're going to dive into the details around packaging and pricing. So we talk about the difference in that term I use, leverage, David. An average MSP with 12 employees generates about $1.2 million a year in total service revenue, whether it's recurring or non-recurring. And top providers with 12 employees, same expenses, right? They're generating 1.8. So just imagine in your business everything was the same, but you could generate that much more service revenue that's falling to the bottom line. And a big part of that is how you look at what you sell and how you sell it and the value that your clients see in your offering. So there's 5 qualities that we work on in my coaching program around business planning and sales focus, being process driven, and something we call command, understanding your cost drivers. But one big one is number 2, and that's packaging and pricing, and that's going to be our focus for today. So if you are selling recurring revenue today, your support offering is the center of your business. It impacts your ability to sell new customers, your ability to, based on what you charge, to deliver quality service, and most importantly, it determines your profitability and your ability to grow your business. So I'm going to say this, David, I see a lot of support offerings, right? And I can tell you a lot about your business just by seeing what you sell, how you price it, and how you offer it. I can probably tell you your margins within a couple percentage. I can tell you why you struggle, with sales, and just overall how you feel about your business just by looking at that. So what happens is people make mistakes in this area that they don't know are mistakes, and they reduce or eliminate their chance of scaling their business profitable before they even start, and they don't even know it. And that's what we want to get to the root of. Why are some people today, the top, like right now, David, and I think you would agree with this, there's more recurring revenue being sold at a higher price today than ever before.
Yeah, you know what? Absolutely. I see it. I mean, I travel the world, as you know, Gary, and I see, like you're saying, the top MSPs in the world are having the ability to sell on value versus playing the commoditized price game.
Yep.
And I think that's a big differential that we see out there today. And I think it's starting to widen the gap in terms of, what we see between different providers in different marketplaces.
You just nailed it. Today, the average provider results haven't really changed, but the gap between the average and the top people is widening. The gap between the haves and the have-a-lot-less is widening, and a lot of it starts, right here. So here's what I say first, is that not just as an MSP, but every business, but certainly every managed service provider needs what I call a superpower. It is like, and your packaging and pricing should represent that superpower. What is your unique process to deliver value? And how do you impact every one of your customers' business, not just their technology, but how do you impact their business results? Because that's where the value proposition is. And the last thing is, how will you institutionalize all your knowledge and experience? Because at the end of the day, the reason people do business with us, and the reason why the really big companies with tons of money that have tried to come into our marketplace, have not really been the threats that everyone thought they were, is because people, our customers are buying us. They're buying our unique knowledge and experience. So if that's the reason why people do business with us, how do we institutionalize that knowledge so that people have confidence that every customer is going to get the same impact from our knowledge and experience? That's what I call your superpower.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. And Gary, I think I have a question on that. In terms of, when you talk about how do you impact your customer's business, I'm a big proponent of selling based on how you protect the way that a business generates revenue. But, I don't know if you see this as well, but I find that a lot of MSPs coming into this space or trying to grow their business focus too much on the technology and the hardware aspect versus protecting those revenue streams for the end customer.
Yeah, and listen, look, let me give an example, okay? And we're going to talk about bundling today, and we're going to use Enable really as a great example, okay? Although when I purchased Enable, you only had about 10 customers. You didn't have 5,500 yet. So that was quite a long time ago, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. But think about it, in this way. When we got acquired back in '05, Mindshift had invested in, they owned a remote backup service. They bought one, right?
Yeah.
We were selling backup at $23 a gig. Okay? How do you think that worked out over the next 3 or 4 years? Well, I can tell you, it ended with us every time a contract come up having to write down it from 23 to 15 to 12 to 5 to, I don't know, 0. Okay?
Yeah.
So all technologies want to cost 0. That's their goal when they grow up. They want to cost 0. And they change. I've watched them come and go for 20 years. But if you think about it differently, and everything we're going to talk about today in this manner, which is we're a really small cost to a business. If you deal with a customer that has 20 or 30 employees, they probably have, $200,000 to $300,000 of costs with employees and overhead every month. So whether we charge them, $3,000 or $4,000, either way, if you can show them how you impact those big costs in your business, right? So I'm saying the same thing you are in a different kind of way to paint a picture. But if we can show them by what we do and how we do it, do we impact big costs, then you can change the conversation. But it starts with this packaging and pricing concept. So, David, here's one way I like to look at it that kind of resonates with people. I call it our chocolate cake analogy, right? So think about a grocery store. A grocery store, every grocery store has the same products, same ingredients, right? So because of that, you might like one store over another, but you're not going to pay $2 for a $1.50 can of beans, right? You're not going to do it. And because of that, because everybody has the same products, that business is a high volume, low margin business. They work on a very low margin, right? Just percentage points on each can of beans. Now think about a bakery. Bakeries also have all the same ingredients, but they combine them into their unique recipe. So I don't know about you, David, but when there's time for a family birthday, we have a bakery that my wife wants to get the birthday cakes, and I drive past 2 or 3 other bakeries to get the birthday cake. And I don't care whether it costs $30 or $35, right? Same ingredients as all those other bakeries, but they combine it, and that's it. And if it's, sticky buns, that's another bakery I have to go to, right? So
yeah, correct.
Yeah, so that's really what it is. And so they are lower volume businesses, but they're much higher margin businesses than grocery stores. So think about your business today. Are you a reseller or are you an MSP? So resellers, right, we all have the same ingredients of hardware and automation and cloud services and support and experience and disaster recovery. We all have these, right? But you need to combine them into your own recipe. That's what I call your superpower, the way that you combine all of those agreements. And what you said, David, right, to this analogy is, you can't sell the ingredients because they change over time, they go down in price, everybody has them, and if you're basing your value on the technology, you're never going to be able to maximize your worth to the customer, as opposed to combining them in a way that impacts, you said, protect their revenue streams, right? And when they think that your recipe is going to impact their business, then everything starts to change and the conversation and the relationship with the customer change. You with me on this?
Yeah, you know what, Gary? It's 100% correct in that, when I have a partner who, comes to me and says, I need to do a return on investment with a customer and I need to show them the value of buying this hardware, I always say to them, no, let's do a return on investment on reducing the overall HR cost of each employee, because that's going to go a lot farther for the business owner.
And I'll tell you this. If you understand the concepts that we're going to go through in the next 45 minutes, okay, and then you relate them to the sales process, you never have to use an ROI calculator again in your life, because it's going to be so easy to show them that the process you're using and what you do, they're going to be able to connect to every pain they ever had, every issue they had. They're going to connect it to their big costs in such a way that you will eliminate price as an objection. Which
I completely agree on that, Gary. And it's funny that, you know, we see the MSPs who struggle, who compete on price, and it's, you know, whenever, for instance, as you're saying on the grocery store side, reselling, we also find that MSPs then have a very hard time standardizing their offering or productizing it, because they're trying to suit the needs of the end customer. I mean, do you see that as well too?
Yeah, absolutely. And so here's what happens is that a customer tells you, I have this issue, this issue, this issue. And then they're telling you, well, I want you to do this. I want you to put somebody here 2 days a week. I want you to install this. I want you. They're telling you the problem, and then they're telling you how to solve it, except that you know, if they knew how to solve it, they wouldn't be in that spot. That's our job, to tell them. Right? And that's what our offering is. It's our way of telling them how to solve their issues and change the way that they look at those problems and issues. And when you have that, you are no longer being treated like a salesperson. You're treated like a business person who's showing them a different way to look at it. But it really starts here. Think about this, right? So what do you include? What should you include? This is just one page. We could have more pages of stuff. There's all this stuff, and you got to decide, what do I put into an offering, and then how do I explain all this complexity to a customer in a way where they can easily, in 15 minutes, understand what we do, why it's different, and how it's going to relate to all the pain that we uncover when we meet them. Okay, all the reasons why we're sitting in front of them in the first place. So here's what a typical managed service offering looks like today. Okay, you do support remote and on-site. You do some basic automation, right? Some of the basic stuff.
Correct.
And like, you know, people that use, you know, End Central. Not everybody is using all the power of it, right? And taking the time to really use their knowledge and experience and put it into the tool. So, and then they're given some advice. I mean, we're all given advice. Somebody asks a question and, you know, we answer it, and, you know, you're their advisor, right? So this is what basically I see, and my question is, hey, does this really define all your knowledge and experience? Does this define your superpower? Is this alone addressing their business, not just technology? So what I'm going to suggest today is that where the average MSP's offering ends is where yours begins. So we're going to go through each of these. Support centralized services, which your RMM is the center. There's more things to it now with hosted applications and infrastructure, but your RMM is still the center of your centralized services. I'm going to introduce a concept that I've been doing for 20 years that really has been our recipe, called Proactive Network Administration, and then we'll talk about Technology Consultant, or VCIO, and what that process is, and be able to show how, when you expand your offering, you can paint a really simple, clear picture, give examples of your process that shows every single prospect and customer why they would get results that are worth more to them.
Yeah, I mean, it's you know, and it's, I think the big struggle that I see a lot in the marketplace, Gary, is that MSPs have a hard time providing accountability. It's what I call cost justification versus monthly spend. They have a very hard time showing that to the business owner or the decision maker, and typically I find it's because if they did sell through and maybe they were lucky, they positioned it completely incorrectly anyways on what it is that they were going to provide in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? When we get to the point where we get to the last piece of it, the technology consulting or VCIO piece, I'm going to give a really simple example of how people can check whether they're off track, and they're going to know whether they're off track today.
Excellent.
So let's start with support. I mean, look, quality support is important, but all MSPs say they have good support, right? So how do you differentiate yourselves? You know, one person says, I pick the phone up an hour and you pick it up in 55 minutes. Is that really what determines quality support? You say that we have more experience. Well, everyone says they have experience. So trying to tell someone you answer a phone better, and at my MSP, my new MSP, what I always tell our support desk people is say, listen, you're a critical part of our business, but you're not the reason that our customers do business with us. You're only the reasons why they're unhappy with us if we don't do a good job. Because they're expecting that we're going to do a good job, that we're going to get back to them in a reasonable time frame, and we're going to resolve their problems. And again, in a time frame that meets the expectations that we've set. So, same thing. We go to centralized services, right? And N Central, your RMM, it's the center of this, right? Automation. And today you have additional, remote backup and remote, maybe you have some Amazon Web Services and other things, but everybody has access to the same tools and technology. So again, I'm saying here, look, if you don't have this dialed in, if you don't have your RMM really locking down and protecting your customers and driving down issues, and you're not making it sing and spending time reviewing tickets and alerts every month and finding ways of impacting your customers, you better get there. Like, they should reach out to you, David, right away, because you have to be 100% on this. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And to this point, Gary, a big part of what we talk about is to manage your internal staff correctly as you build your centralized services is to have the proper KPIs in place. And I just find today that MSPs tend to not track KPIs internally in their business to really understand where they are. Or, and I don't know if you see this as well, they maybe at a business level give too much control to their engineering team to make decisions that really would impact the business in potentially a very negative way.
Oh, absolutely. So one of the things that we teach is when it comes to centralized services, the delivery of automation, that there's one person and they have a backup, but we don't allow every single tech to decide for every single customer, because it's all about standards. And the reason why people are protected and the reason why they're secure is because we're doing it the same way with every single customer, and we're able to look at it. And one thing that I learned early on, really in the beginning, working with your colleague Mike Cullen, way back when, was he taught me that, listen, it's not about having the most alerts, it's about being able to have the right ones and have as few alerts as you need so that you can react to those ones. And a lot of people really miss that point there. It's that we're trying to drive down noise levels. We're trying to drive down ticket levels. And I'm going to talk about that metric in a few minutes.
Perfect.
Okay, so now here's where we get to this, and I'm going to tell you, David, that this is a role and a process that I developed in my first MSP, and I've trained hundreds and hundreds of MSPs since then, that really changed everything. When we implemented this, our pricing and our value went up. The results our clients went up dramatically. We were able to charge more, deal with better customers. And here's what it is. The concept is this. I always ask this question at live events. How many people here feel like if they had a higher level of standardization, not just hardware, but I'm talking about detailed configuration standards across their customer base, a higher level of standardization, that their customers and their business would be better? Every hand goes up, okay? So my next question is, well, why don't you? And here's what the answer is. You don't have a process for that, and it's nobody's job. It's nobody's job. The only time most MSPs use their standards, because they all have standards, is when they implement something new, okay, or when they onboard a customer or something breaks. And so
Correct.
I'm saying you need to have a process of continuous alignment. Every backup works the day it's installed, right?
Definitely.
Every firewall is secure the day you install it. So why do we ever have a backup issue? Right? Well, because things change constantly. Employees came, employees went. The line of business application got upgraded, and they changed the directory that it was in, and they didn't tell us about it. And right, there's a million reasons why we meet people when their backup and their security or 50 other things aren't working, but they were when they were set up. And so, this is a process where you're going to have your recipe. This is going to be the center of your chocolate cake, where you're going to develop technical standards and continuously align your customers against those standards. And one of the key metrics that we teach in my coaching program is tickets per month per endpoint. So how many tickets and alerts, everything that's reactive, do you generate relative to the amount of endpoints you manage? And most people, when they come into our program, they're at about 1 ticket or 1.5 tickets a month per endpoint. That's all tickets and alerts. We set a target of 0.5 tickets a month per endpoint. I run my current MSP at about 0.35. I ran my first MSP as low as 0.2. So when you think about that, my customers are dealing with a half or a third or less of the amount of issues that your customers are. If I can show them a process and they can believe that that's possible, do you think they care whether they pay me $2,500 or $3,000? Right?
No, absolutely. And I think, and that all plays into controlling, obviously, your cost per ticket and so forth. And I guess a question on this then, Gary, because I see that MSPs get displaced by another provider because they don't manage this area correctly.
Yep.
If they don't have this internally, do you recommend that they have offline systems to manage this, to have standardization across their teams, or what is your best course of action on this?
So I'll show you this. I'm going to show you the process in a little bit of detail right now. So we did it with some spreadsheets, unfortunately, in the beginning, and now we have a tool also that people can use to do it. So mainly what I want to talk about today is I want to talk about the concept and the structure of this, so people can really think about it and maybe start doing some of their own standards. So first, think about all this could be more pages. We have all these things that we would like to have standardized configurations, and beneath them there's a lot of detail. There's hundreds of pieces of detail. So the first thing you want to do is, when you organize this, is create a hierarchy, right? So start at a top level. So here's what we recommend. You can name them what you want. We call them sections, categories, and questions. Start with the sections. They're the big things like internal security. Then beneath that, you might have several categories. One example here is domain password policy. And then under that, you'd have questions. So in this case, it's complex passwords. Is Active Directory configured to use complex passwords, yes or no? Now, that one question, David, alone, might not necessarily be the most important question, but when you combine it with all those other sections and categories and questions, together they make up a level of configuration standardization that starts to move the needle in terms of generating issues, noise, and reducing your average resolution time, right? So if you already know how everything is configured because it's standard, when there is an issue, you'll spend more time. And you mentioned it. You've got to not only reduce the number of tickets, but you have to lower your average cost per ticket. They're two really critical things. And here's something else that we learned over time. When you set up your standards, put them into yes and no questions, okay? Is the maximum password age less than 180? Yes or no? And the reason you want to do this is you don't want to leave room for interpretation. You want to cover a lot of details, and you want to simply be able to paint a clear picture. Okay, for this client right now, as of this point in time, this week with this review, here's what's in our standards, and here's what's out of our standards. Here's what's in our standards, here's what's out. So it's black and white, and you can train almost anyone. All they have to know is, what's the question, where do I look for it, and how do I know whether the answer is yes or no? Does this make sense?
Yeah, totally. And I think this is extremely valuable to everybody on the line, even if they're trying to do it today. I think the yes-no versus open-ended is critical. Do you use this process in terms of the way that, you've developed it in other MSPs? Do you use that in your sales process to show your capability to an end customer?
Absolutely. So when I get to the end and show you the rest of the process, I'm going to tell you just the couple things that I brought on a sales call, and I'm going to give you a hint. One of them wasn't a laptop. Okay? And I'm going to show you, and I'll explain to you how I related that back, and literally in 15 minutes be able to separate myself from the competition.
That's excellent.
Okay, so now we've gone in. We've done this review. On average, we do reviews. We don't review everything every month, but we're doing reviews. One of our net admins will manage about 20 clients. So we're reviewing most clients on average once a month. So some are more, some are less, but we're doing, this is continuous. We're doing them on average across our base about one day. We're spending about one day a month on this. So here's what happens now. We're going to move on to the next piece, which is technology consultant or VCIO. So everyone says they do, hey, well, we do QBRs with our customer, and we do, we meet with them and talk about their business. But what I find is that rather than being a virtual CIO, they are what I call a VCO, a virtual Captain Obvious. They don't have all this alignment information, right, because that role and process doesn't exist. So all they're really telling the client is what anybody would tell them. Your backup doesn't work, you should fix it. Your licensing expired, you should renew it. Your server is old, you should replace it, right? So that's what I would call a virtual Captain Obvious. But what happens is, if you can hand a technology consultant, okay, all of this information and say, listen, here's where they're in alignment, here there's out of alignment. Now all I have to do is look what's out of alignment and talk about the business impact for that particular business. Once we do that, now we can create an IT roadmap for every customer. We can create a strategy and we can create a budget. And most of the customers that I met, and I've worked with over 200 customers in my career, they always said they had a budget, and when we got through a detailed process like this, they all said the same thing. They never really understood IT as an investment, and they never really had a great budget. So the key here is, though, we're leveraging the work that network administration role, all that alignment work.
So you're really just taking that, sorry Gary, you're really just taking that internal information that you gather and you flip that over obviously into business value. I'm a huge proponent of VCIO versus what we hear is just general account management or automated reports to the business owner each month where they don't even read them. So, it's interesting the concept that you have. And I think where we see some of the struggle, and maybe you can speak to this a bit, is a technician-owned business as a service provider having a very hard time figuring out how to relay that on a business level.
Yeah, so whenever that happens, here's what you have to have. You have to have a process, okay? So think about now, if you're just sitting down and saying, oh, what should I recommend to someone? It's pretty hard to go beyond the obvious. But now, if I'm a VCIO and I'm just seeing all these answers, right, that were gathered from the alignment process, now I look at it and say, is Active Directory configured to use complex passwords, yes or no? It's no. Okay. Now I can say, well, what is this business? Well, if it's a flower shop, maybe that's marginal. It's not the biggest deal in the world, right? But if they're a bank or a healthcare provider, that's a bomb, right? That's a big deal. This is something that relates to security. So now all we have to do is go through all the misalignments, ask some questions about their business to put it in that context, and we can determine the business impact of every misalignment. So it's kind of served up for you, right? And it really focused. And we find that most people can get there, right? If it's organized in the right way, they're able to understand the impact of technology misalignments. So
yeah, I think that's a big point, Gary, in that a lot of them are trying to make recommendations without the empirical evidence.
Right. So this is what I call a technology summary. Now, I was the first VCIO in my first MSP, and I was the person you just described, David. So when I would go out to sit with a business owner or a C-level executive, I had a stack of stuff with me. I had patch status reports. I had all the ticketing information. I had software expiration dates. I couldn't get a decision maker to come to a second meeting. It turns out they didn't care as much about patch management as I did, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But when I went out to them, and I kept that stuff in my bag for support if I needed it, but when I went back and said, listen, on a regular basis, we ask this many questions. Of those, here's how many that were out of alignment. Of those, there's just 2 pages of stuff. There's 5 things today that I want to talk about that I think you need to make decisions on. And they would say, oh, Gary, well, bombs are bad. I'm like, well, not necessarily. So here's an example, David. Let's just say you go to them and say, look, you have this server, and that server is 5 years old. Based on its age and based on the current way that it's backed up, if it was down, you're going to be down for probably 2 to 3 business days. Now, if they say to you, well, that's an archive server of an old app that we use. We don't really update it. We have a backup of it. If it goes down, we can live without it. Okay, it's not a bomb. But if they say, well, wait a minute, that's our line of business server. If it goes down, we can't be down for more than 8 business hours. Well, at that point, they have a business decision to make. They have 2 choices. Change your expectations or change the technology. Okay?
Yeah.
If we don't have that conversation with that business owner and that server goes down, whose fault is it, David?
Yeah, well, no, absolutely. And it's, you know, we already know where the blame is going to lie initially, but I mean, here you have the empirical evidence and you've made the recommendation. And I think a question in the way that you formulate this information, which is amazing, do you find that you can help to push longer-term agreements with some of your customers, which obviously creates a better valuation for you as an MSP?
Yeah, you can longer-term agreements, and I'll say even be outside the agreement, longer-term relationships, but there's one other way you can judge this, David, and it's based on what percentage of projects or non-recurring services do you generate every month as a percentage of your MRR, okay? So today, if you have $100,000 a month of recurring revenue and you're generating less than $25,000 a month of project-based services to that base, your customers aren't on board with you, okay? They're not on board. Yeah. You're not giving them the kind of advice they can make decisions on. If you're generating 25, 30, 40% non-recurring services and additional MRR based on your recurring revenue, that means they're engaged. And David, what happens when that means when they're investing in those right things, when they understand they have risk and they are making the business decision to reduce that risk, guess what happens? Ticket counts go down even more, right?
Correct. And then you reduce your overall cost and increase your overall margins and profitability.
Gary, we have a quick question from the audience about tickets.
Go ahead.
When you said tickets per month, do you mean requests from a client or do you mean actual trouble issues?
Everything. Anything that is not scheduled, okay? So, you know, VCIO time is scheduled, net admin time is scheduled, the time you spend delivering centralized services is scheduled. So any request, tickets, and alerts that come in is considered reactive. That's a ticket.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So here's something people can ask themselves, David. When you go out to talk to a customer, are you presenting information to make business decisions, or are you going out there with the kind of things we talked about, which is just, you know, reports and tickets and, you know, I mean, the big one is ticket reports. If you're going out there and trying to justify how good you are by how much tickets and how much time you spend on them, you miss the whole concept here, David, right? We got to stop.
Absolutely.
And you're only going to be worth your time if you're still trying to justify your worth to them by time and not how you impact their business. We have a philosophical difference here that's holding you back in your business.
Well,
So
and
now
you're right on that.
Now I'm getting all fired up, David.
Yeah, no, you know what, Gary? I agree because you know what? I'm a business person. I'm not an engineer, and I don't understand patch management either. So if you came to me with a report, my eyes would probably glaze over as well.
Yep.
We have another question from the audience, gentlemen. And the question is, are your VCIO meetings considered billable?
No. Here's why. And I'm going to show this in a slide. We know exactly what it costs. We know how much a VCIO costs. We know how many clients they manage. And we build that costing in with a 75% gross margin into our offering. So it's not billed separately, but yeah, it's paid, bought and paid for, billed at high margins.
Okay.
Well, and that VCIO acts as an extension of your sales team. This is your, you know, I talk to MSPs all the time about upsell, cross-sell, and a lot of them are always looking for new business when there's business sitting right in front of them in their existing base.
Maximize. Look, your average client size, what your average client spends in terms of services per year, is one of the three numbers that determines your financial future in this business. So, yeah, and if your clients aren't investing, no matter what you say, nothing speaks other than that. They're not engaged, and they're not seeing the risk that they have in their business, right?
Completely agree.
So now take a look at this and think about it. You're out there with, support and centralized services and giving some basic advice compared to being able to go and show them. So that you asked me a question, do you use this in the sales process? Yeah, it is the sales process. We'd go out and talk to customers. We would uncover some pain. We have an issue with response. We have an issue with security. We have an issue with backup. We have this, this issue. And every time I would glump them kind of together at first and say, listen, all of those issues, they're not vendor issues, they're not technology issues, they are process issues. Let me show you the process. And I would show them a sample best practice. I'd show them an example. Hey, remember you talked about backup and your frustrations? Hey, all backups work when you install them. Let me tell you, here's all the things we check every single month when it comes to backup. Can you understand why my clients don't deal with that? Yeah. Hey, we talked about this. Look, hey, you said that maybe your vendor has not grown with you and you're not getting the advice and you're worried you have risks you don't know about. Look at our technology summary. Do you understand how we take all this information? Do you see how you're able to make better business decisions? Can you see why this process will get a different result besides all the other questions you're asking me about what antivirus we use, why you shouldn't care about that? Yeah, I do. Well, let me ask you, do you think it's logical that because we're doing these things different than other people, that the things you talked about will be solved? Yes. Okay, we're going to be $1,000 a month more. They're $4,000 and we're $5,000. If you knew those issues would go away, would you spend $1,000 a month more? And I can tell you that I personally have sold probably $1.5 million of monthly recurring revenue in my lifetime, me and my teams. In almost every case, David, when I got there, two things were usually true. They told me they were fine, and they were spending less than when I had to charge them. Okay? But once I asked them questions in the right way, and they saw their risk and their pain and their productivity differently, and then I was able to relate what we do to that, we were able to eliminate and actually use price as an advantage. Are you with me?
I'm completely 100% with you, Gary.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's the level of, the way that you basically bring it to a level of risk mitigation that then turns into profitability and revenue protection for a business owner, as opposed to just being the guy who's trying to sell through technology.
But in a simple, uncomplicated way, a conceptual way, with a couple examples, not trying to give them some ROI calculator that they're going to tie you up like a pretzel with. So, all right, let me get through this because I got a bunch to cover, more stuff to cover here. So I got to kind of get in gear. But I really want to give time to that core concept because it's so important. So, with your service offering, focus on that end result. What results do you want to deliver to every client? What's the unique process, and how will you explain that, how you separate yourself? And with that, make sure you're bundling the services, right? Because you don't want them looking at the ingredients. You want them looking at the chocolate cake. And so when we talk about bundling services, there's a lot of examples, but I think what you're doing with your suite of products couldn't be a better example of what should be bundled in to every offering.
Yeah, I mean, it's, the idea and the way that we look at it, Gary, is that we understand that every MSP has, the same requirements to some level. And if you look at something, for instance, like a remote control, every MSP requires a tool like that. And then some type of service type management platform to be able to combine that information, that ticketing, and so forth. And those two alone can work for a reactive service provider who's smaller and growing into this space, and it meets their needs.
Yep.
But as you start to move up the maturity model, as you're aware, and you want to become a full-fledged managed service provider, and you want to have that control in the environment, then you require the RMM, and the three coupled together bring you that capability, right? They bring you the ability to do the performance-based monitoring, to grab the empirical evidence, to control the noise that you get, and even control what the end user has the ability to create an issue around.
Yep. Yeah,
that's huge.
Yeah,
Yeah, it is huge, and I think to your point of noise and so forth, that's a big component that we see with MSPs, because as they let the noise permeate and they don't manage the expectations of the end user or the capability of the end user, what happens is people just start ignoring everything. And that's when their level of service starts to decline dramatically.
I'm with you. And so if people want to learn more, they can go get a free trial?
Yeah, absolutely. Just come check us out at enable.com. It's really easy. Sign up. You get the solution. You can deploy it. You'll see the capability out of the box, the automation, the reporting, and so forth. And I think that, you know, a lot of what you talked about today, Gary, and having that proper process defined and to understand the way that you deliver service and the configuration protocols, we're on track with you, because we built that into our solution today already, because we know from working with MSPs what they require. So our platform, our core RMM and Central, is 100% driven by our partner feedback on how we develop it, because we're not an MSP, so we rely on the MSPs to tell us how to build it.
Awesome. All right, let's do this. We got some great questions, but before we get to those, let me drive through, because I do want to sum up a few important things, and I want to talk about pricing a little bit, because that's critical. I don't have a lot of time to spend on it, but I want to make sure we hit pricing and give people some of the basics, structure for how to price things and how to look at it. So, but just real quick, here's a little checkpoint you can do. Take a look at your offering today and be honest. Ask yourself, how much of what you're offering today is stuff that's critical but that everybody have? I would call ingredients. And how much of what you're offering is your recipe or superpower? Your process, your best practices, your standardization, a true process around consulting. And the more you're to the left side, I can tell you that what's happening is you can't get the prices you want, you're not closing things consistently, you have one view of the marketplace. It's different than the people that are on the right side of this. So that's a quick check you can do today. So what you need to do is this. Look, one, you got to define your edges, right? Be real clear on what's included and not included, because if you're fuzzy about what's included in your monthly fee and someone's paying you $3,000 or $4,000 a month, it creates risk. Two, limit your choices and options. I see people that got bronze, silver, gold, pewter, tin, and you can have it with or without, you know, backup and with or without virus. If you think the customer needs it, put it in there. Because when you combine it, that would be like saying, look, you can have a cake and you can have it with or without the egg. Well, no, for the cake to be super delicious, the egg and the sugar have to be in there. So we're the baker. We're going to tell you. I'm not saying have one offering, but I'm saying limit the number of offerings and make sure that every one of them has that superpower so that you can create value. And remove entrance barriers. I mean, don't make people sign like a complicated agreement, right? Or have them be straightforward, because if a client wants to leave, they're going to leave anyway, David. They all are bigger and have more lawyers than we do in general in my time in this business. So make it simple and straightforward where that agreement defines your relationship. Don't make them have to upgrade everything in big, we'll get to it over time with the alignment process. So we want to bring clients on and make it easy for them to do business with us. So summarize things here. Good packaging should explain the reason the prospect should do business with you. It should make them easy to understand why you're going to get them a different business result than they get today. You should be able to align your offering with your service delivery. Each one of those 4 areas I talked about, they're service delivery people or roles or partial roles if you're small in your business. And then clearly separate our results from others. That's the key. Everything you're doing, hey, is this going to explain to a customer why they're going to get better results than the other people that they're going to look at or their current vendor? And it should eliminate price as an objection. So let's talk about pricing for a minute here. One, when it comes to pricing offering, keep it simple. I say don't share your psychosis. So, I mean, we get all wrapped around the axle about how we price, but, just think about, use averages. What do you want your average all-in seat price to be? And I go as far as to say, when I'm talking to a prospect, I don't talk to them about seat price. I talk to them about our process, our results, what's included, what's not, and a monthly fee. they don't even see how I calculated my cost until they're ready to buy and I hand them an agreement, because it's a metric for us. I don't want them thinking in that terms. I want them thinking about, hey, what should I invest per month and what am I going to get in return? And then project that model. What if you had 10 customers like that, or 50 customers? How would your business look? And I can tell you this for sure. Your price is not too high. Your value might be too low, but your price is never too high. And look at the impact of this. Here are two businesses that both manages 1,000 seats. Okay, so 50 customers with an average of 20 seats is 1,000 seats. The top MSP is at $140 on seat price. So they generate $140,000 a month from those 50 customers. The bottom MSP is at $95. They generate $95,000. David, what's better, 140 or 95?
Yeah. I think at the top end, I think is where I'd like to go.
And guess who has more reactive tickets? The guy who's charging $95, because all he can afford to do is answer tickets. He doesn't have enough money to do all the alignment and consulting and stuff that the clients see value in. The same reason, the same things that reduce ticket counts and reduce risk for customers is the same things that drive up your seat price. In every market, there are people selling at 95, and there are people that are getting 140. That's the reality of our business today.
Yeah, it's you know what, Gary, I agree. And when partners come to me, and I talk to a lot on a daily basis, and they say, I pitched a service offering, and the first thing that the guy said to me was it was too expensive. And I said, what did you lead with whenever you got to that phase? And they lead with price before they talk about what they're actually going to provide.
Yep. That's exactly it. And I can't spend a lot of time on this, but I just want to give the concept, right? So if you look at each of those delivery areas and then try to take those costs, and put them into like an average cost per seat for each of them, you can determine what your average cost per seat is across your client base. So in this example, I use $36. If your cost per seat is $36 and you're charging $125 a seat, you're at 72% gross margins. We want to see gross margins on managed services between 70 is the minimum, but I'm saying 75% is where I shoot for, right, in my MSP. So if you're at $100, you're at 64%, 85, 58%. And I was with a bunch of partners yesterday helping them that are new members of True Methods, and most of them had costs when we figured this out. They were more like $40 to $45. So if you're $40 to $45 cost and you're at 100 to 115, you're like at 55% gross margins. We have there's professional service providers that have higher margins than that. And you're not going to make it up in volume. So if you don't understand your cost per seat, it's really hard to determine what you should price at. All right, I want to hit this one last concept, and I know we're a little pressed on time, but it's so important. It's central to my coaching program. I call it leverage. It's the relationship between an hour worked and a dollar billed. So we want to generate the most amount of revenue with the fewest amount of employees. So an average MSP with 6 employees, they would have annual service revenue of about $600,000. So that's not product, that's just services, recurring or non-recurring, any type of service that we're delivering with our people. So they would generate about $100,000 of service revenue per total employee, not per tech, because you got to pay everybody. We set a target of $150,000 per employee. So that same 6-employee company would generate $900,000. So that average MSP has $300,000 of unrealized profitability, and it's in the form of usually of the pricing they command and the noise that's created as a result. So here's what everybody can do today. You can figure out your unrealized profitability. Take your total number of employees in your company, including you if you work in the business, multiply it by 150,000. Then subtract from that what your actual annual total service revenue is, and that number is what's available to you, right, if you can apply the principles that we're talking about today. So one of the things you're going to need to do to probably go get that money is build a sales engine. And maybe that will be a good topic for our next webinar. We'll get to sales. If you can create separation based on your superpower, if you can start to make price and have the reason that you charge a little bit more, the reason they do business with you. You can set a goal for new recurring revenue. You can do some basic lead generation activities. You don't need a lot, but a little bit. You implement some accountability, and you can bring on, everyone should be able to bring on a new customer or new customers at the right price every single month, just by having the right offering and a little bit of discipline, David. So here's the top 3 mistakes I see, David. I'm sorry, you're going to add something?
No, I was just saying I completely agree, Gary, and I think your slide on leverage and figuring out that unrealized profitability and revenue sitting right in everybody's business today is critical to what everybody's on here for, really, to learn.
Yeah, and people were asking what's included. I'm saying when you do the leverage number, include all services. I don't care whether they're recurring or non-recurring. Any service you deliver, and you're trying to create a relationship between services delivered, now I'll tell you, to increase your leverage, you're going to need probably 70% of your service revenue to come from recurring services, because if you're pricing them right, you're going to be at 75 or more % gross margin compared to lower on non-recurring services or hardware. So here's the top 3 mistakes. People are out there selling ingredients. You started off talking about that, David. They're selling ingredients, and they're not selling the result or the chocolate cake or the recipe. They have too many choices and options, and all those choices don't deliver the right end result, and they're just not charging enough to deliver the results that their clients deserve. So if you can look at this little checkpoint, if you're all in seat price, so take all of your recurring revenue divided by all the seats you support, if it's $100 or less, if you take your average MRR, average contract size, so take all your recurring revenue divided by the number of clients that make it up, if it's less than 2,000, if your true net profit after owner salary is less than 10%, if you're generating, not generating at least 25% of non-recurring services as a percentage of MRR, and if your sales are inconsistent, at least in some part, your issue is your packaging and pricing. I can say that. When that's not my opinion, that's my experience. So we want you to build a unique offering, separate your results. It's value that determines price. As soon as you get that, when you say my customers won't pay that price, it means they won't pay that price for your offering today and the value they see in it. But they will pay it once you increase the value. And this is it, man. This is the gold rush. What took me 12 years to do in my first MSP, we're going to do in 6 or 7 in the new MSP. And I don't work in it. I got a young kid, he's 32, that runs it. That's how good the marketplace is today.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Gary, and I think the information today has been overly invaluable.
Is it okay? Can I take like 3 minutes?
Yeah, we've got.
And then I'll answer
we're
questions.
Really short on time. So
Okay.
There's a couple of questions that we've been holding on to that I would really like to get to that maybe pertain to some of the earlier slides that you were talking about. One of the questions that came up earlier was, how do you convince clients outside, the legal, financial, or healthcare markets, those markets that are very heavily regulated? How do you convince them that security will have an impact on their business and they need to take it seriously?
Well, look, it's easier to do in those kind of regulated industries, right? But we don't have to prove our worth just on security. So every business has a different pressure point. So for one client, security might be the biggest hot button. For another one, we prove some value with it, and we got to go to another area around productivity or functionality or risk in other ways to prove it. So the answer is there's this kind of little matrix of where that pain is, and when you have a process for questioning for pain, you'll be able to direct what that pain is based on that customer and their needs. So
right.
Look, so let me run. There's a couple other ones I want to answer. Let me run through this real quickly. Tell people about True Methods, and then I'll stay on a couple of minutes over if you want and answer those final questions.
Sure.
So here's our chocolate cake, right? We help people build a competitive advantage. We help them eliminate price as an objective, generate some leads so that they can combine those two things to build recurring revenue. And if you're selling more people at a higher price, you're going to dramatically increase your margins, and that's what it takes if you're a business owner to achieve a level of financial independence from this process. And so here's how our Formula One program, which is our coaching program, works. It's an online program that includes over 150 hours in our portal of role-based content. Every aspect of the business, from packaging and pricing to sales, service delivery, metrics, really every aspect, business planning. And we do 2 live webinars to update that content every single month, and I do weekly podcasts to motivate and inform our members. We have a great community with forums, a place you can ask me and my team questions. We do events, and we have tools. One of them is we saw a little bit of my IT process that some of our members will add to their subscription. We teach you 20 smart numbers to evaluate your business. We give you some templates around sales and business planning. So you're going to come in, you're going to do a plan, you're going to calibrate your business, you're going to work on your packaging and pricing. We're going to lead you down that path of developing that superpower, and so you can have some discipline around generating leads and raising your expectations. So normally we have an onboarding process. It's $1,500, and our monthly fee is $399. So today we're waiving our onboarding fee for a limited number of people today, and reducing our monthly fee to $349. So you just put your credit card in for $349, and we're month to month. We don't have any agreements. The hundreds and hundreds of people around the world are nice enough to let me hit their credit card every month is because they think they're better with us than without us, and many of them have been with us since 2009. So we have 10 onboarding slots. So the first 10 attendees that email us at gary.promo@truemethods.com, that's TRU methods, no E in true, with the subject line, sign me up. We'll send you the information, and again, it's $349 a month, and it's month to month. Awesome. Okay, we're just top of the hour. Are there 1 or 2 questions you still want to throw?
There's a couple of quick questions that I think we can get to very quickly, and then we can answer the rest of the questions offline, maybe when we send out the slide deck and recording later this week. So one of the questions is, do you suggest eliminating contract length terms to eliminate barriers?
You don't need to. So when I first started, we were month to month with our agreements, and we were required. We went to having 1 to 3 year agreements, and what we did was to eliminate the entrance barrier. We just gave them an out during like the first 60 or 90 days. We said, listen, if you think there's anything to make it easy for them that doesn't turn out the way you thought, we'll give you an ejection button. No one ever used it, and once we got past that period, then they were in the contract. So they don't mind signing the contract. You just have to remove the risk for them. So you can do both. You can eliminate the entrance barrier, and you can get long-term agreements. I'm doing it every day. There's one question here I saw that I wanted to try to grab. Diane was asking about the expertise of staff. That you have to have
that was one of the questions I wanted to get to.
Yeah, you have to have quality staff and appropriate level of experience to deliver quality services. I agree, Diane, completely. But a lot of people have quality staff and don't deliver the same results. So the idea of building a process first and then putting the people into that process is really what that combination is. And here's the key to this business. One thing that has changed in this business, it's much harder to get good people today. Okay? There's zero tech unemployment. So it's great to say we're going to build a team of A players, but it's really, really hard to do. So what you have to do through process is create job roles, okay, that you can put people into that are so process-oriented that you can get A results from B people. Putting people in a position so they can take that knowledge and experience and take all the knowledge and experience of your company, and they can be able to leverage that. And if you're not doing that today and you're just trying to get the best people and put them out there and base it on that, I can tell you you're going to get stuck.
Right. Well, I think that's unfortunately all the questions we have time for, because we are over our allotted time. This has truly been a very interesting and very exceptional webinar. I'd like to remind everybody that we are recording today's session, and I will be sending out the slides with the recording by the end of the week. Thank you, Gary, again for a great session. Thank you, David, for sitting in today with Gary. It was great between the two of you, and wish everybody a very good day.
Okay, thanks a lot, David. Thank you so much, my friend.
Hey, thanks, Gary. We'll chat soon. Take care.